Greetings and welcome to Exporting to South America. Use your website. Our webinar today will be starting in just 30 seconds. Greetings and welcome to exporters and all companies who are looking for exporting to South America. Use your websites to grow your sales. Our webinar is starting now, and we're delighted to be here today. My name is Susanna Hardy. I'm Chief Content Officer at IBT Online, and I'll be joined with my colleagues and to talk about using websites to grow your sales, your business, your brands in South America. Before we start our webinar in full, and just while we wait for the last attendees to log on, just a few little quick housekeeping rules. So first, with regards housekeeping, this is one of a series of webinars. We've had the Go Global webinar series now for 4 years, and you can look at back copies of webinars that we posted in the past about markets or about specific events to help you with website localization and international websites across the world. Our next webinar, by the way, is at the end of April, and it's about search engine optimization. It's called Get Found Online in International Markets. This webinar today will be 45 minutes long. During the webinar, we will have 3 polls. We'll ask you to vote on how you feel about things, about the answer that most corresponds to your requirements. There's also a live Q&A at the end. We would really encourage you to put your questions into the chat box. We'll be curating questions during the webinar, saving them at the end, and then spending about 10 minutes on live Q&A at the end. So please do put in your questions into the chat box. We'd be delighted to try and answer them if we can. We've also got some handouts for you, infographics mainly, which we'll get to later in the webinar. And just know that this webinar is being recorded. You will all receive a recording and a slide deck in your inbox on Friday, which means that you can just sit back, enjoy, and listen, and ask questions, and hopefully learn with us about exporting to South America. At the very end of this webinar, at the very end, when I close out, there is a very, very, very brief survey. We would really, really appreciate if you could just fill out the survey. There's about 5 questions. That's all. They're yes/no questions, very fast. And it just helps us make sure that we're on trend in terms of what you're looking for. And so we can tailor our webinars for that. So let's get started introducing the team. So I'm Susanna Hardy, as I said. I'm Chief Content Officer at IBT Online. I've been with IBT now for over a decade, really focusing on the content part of our business, both for our own content, such as webinars, our website, and also for clients and client content. My background is actually it's more in finance, but in financial analysis and in the web. Samantha Soficia is joining me today. She's our online business development manager. She's based in the States, and I'm very happy that she's very pleased that she's joining me today. She's originally from Argentina, so knows a lot about South America as well, and works with a lot of our clients on South American websites. And she's now based, as I said, in the USA. So just a very quick word also about IBT. IBT Online, that stands for International Business and Technologies Online. And we've been around since about 2002. We are 100% focused on companies that do business internationally. And we are 100% focused on providing online tools for that internationalization. So we build and market websites for companies. We are a US company, and we are in the private sector, obviously. So we have offices outside the US as well, and I'm currently sitting actually in the UK office. We work also with US states as part of their export assistance programs. We're very, very proud to be working with with now 18 U.S. states in their export promotion programs, and that's been I think a real great success and a tremendous boost for American exporters in particular. So let's talk about what we're today. We're talking about exporting to South America. And what Samantha and I have decided to do is to divide it up into 4 main sections. We're going to sort of get the first sort of broad brush picture of South America on and offline, talking about sort of the major macro numbers, and then also some of the online scenarios. Then I'm going to look more about South American websites in general, sort of what do websites look like in South America, what kind of search engines do they use, are there regional differences, and so on. Then I'm going to drill down again into social media in South America, because that is really important, especially in the South American market, and a very good tool for exporters to build brand awareness and to engage local populations. And finally, we're going to go through some case studies and look at sort of how some exporters have used websites directly to boost their businesses in South America. So let's start then with South America on and offline. So first, let's look at just some basics, just the sort of the basic big picture numbers. It's obviously, it's South America's been a region with huge economic potential for a very long time, but it looks to us that a lot of exporters are now beginning to realize some of that potential. The potential is really starting to come through. I guess there's a bit more, the governments are a bit more stable, there's less inflation, therefore stabler currencies. Definitely a rising middle classes and demand for increasingly sophisticated products. So it really means that exporters are beginning to focus a lot on South America and get some really good returns on their investment in South America. It's composed, it's a huge region. It's composed of 33 different countries and over 600 million people. So as I said, really a really huge region, with Brazil being the largest. But some of the others, if you look in sort of big regions like Mesoamerica, and then combining Mexico with the Isthmus, you start to get sort of these big regions as well. Moving on in terms of some of the facts and figures, one of the main points that always strikes me, I always think of South America as the vast pampas of Argentina and the Amazon rainforest. In fact, it's one of the most urbanized continents that there is. 80% of the total population of South America lives in cities. So it's very, very concentrated populations. I think that the other point that's interesting to note is the languages. Now, 60% are speaking Spanish as a first language. 34% is this Portuguese, the second language, obviously very much focused on Brazil. And then indigenous languages, and there's a list of them on that picture. It's up to 6% of the population that are still left for native indigenous population languages as their mother tongue. So as I said, 60% Spanish is the predominant, and then 34% Portuguese. One of the factors that I really want to bring out as well is just the rise of Asia. I guess it's been the result of Asia's demand for commodities. So trade between these two continents has really been growing in double digits. In fact, on average, 20% a year for the last decade. That means that Asia is very fast catching up on the USA as being the primary trading partner. So at the moment, the primary trading partner for all South America is the USA, but Asia is right up there and will overtake the USA within the next 2 years, it's expected. So rising wealth, but also rising, still some challenges. So rising wealth means also increasingly skilled labor and very competitive rates and competitive wages. A lot of the free trade agreements, some of them also newly negotiated. Some very solid investment programs that have been going on. If you look into Brazil, if you look into Mexico, some very interesting infrastructure. There's also still, though, a lot of challenges. I'd say more underemployment than unemployment. There's still a lot of instability, social instability, and really the social divide is still too strong and too wide in most of South America. And then finally, just economically, a continued strong reliance on commodities. So this is just sort of a very broad brush, big picture, but I did want to sort of, set the scene there. And I would like you now all to grab your mouses, and let's get ready for our first poll. So I'm going to launch this poll, and it's just to ask you, just sort of looking out there in terms of the markets, what are your top 2 export destinations in South America? And oh, it's good. Thank you very much. You're responding very quickly. That's lovely. Just going to give you a little bit of feedback while we wait for the last people to go. It's very, very widely spread out, in fact. Mexico and Central America are the lead, with about 50% saying Mexico and Central America. But the other 3, Brazil, Colombia, and that area, Chile and Argentina, recouping the remaining amount. So thank you all very, very much for that. I'm going to close that poll now. Very, strong preference for Mexico, but then evenly split between the other countries. So closing that poll and just working on now, drilling down onto the online environment in South America. Sort of, South America websites. What do they look like? How are they going? Let's step back just a second. I'm going to make use of these tremendous resources put out by Hootsuite and We Are Social. In January 2019, they published their latest update for the digital environment world, and we use these quite a lot. You'll see a lot of these slides. We're very grateful to Hootsuite and We Are Social. Total of the world, January 2019 is a static picture. 7.5 billion people in the world. 5 billion of them use phones. 4.5 billion of them are using the internet. So those are and 3.5 billion are active social media users. So those are the very big picture numbers. So over 50% of the world's population, 57% of the world's population is now actively using the internet. And when Hootsuite do these surveys, they're actually looking for, they're not looking for someone who goes on the internet sort of once a month. They're looking for individual access codes, regular users. They classify a user as someone who's a regular user on a weekly basis. And of that, 45%, the world, 45% are on social media. These are just the big picture world pictures, and for the world, I think they're worth sort of every now and then looking at and saying, wow, that's quite something. And if we look about the Americas in particular now on this slide, sort of the total Americas, Canada, North USA, Meso, and Central, and then South America, all of it, 1 billion people. Of that 1 billion, pretty well all of them. In fact, there's a higher mobile subscription rate than number of people. So many, many people, and you'll find this particularly in South America, we'll get down to this later, have more than one telephone, more than one mobile phone. Penetration rate of the internet, 78%. So nearly 80% of people in the Americas are on the internet, and 2/3 are using social media. So, again, these are very strong numbers we find. When we're looking at these kind of numbers, if you think that your life in your working life, and if you're a U.S. company or a U.K. company or a German company, if you think that you are, gosh, I'm online all the time. We've got Facebook, we've got my computer, my laptop, my iPhone, my iPad. It never leaves me. I'm online. I've got emails coming in at all times. The same is very true of South America. South America, as we'll see soon, is a very, very plugged-in place. A couple of the major sort of attributes, one of the major attributes that we want to talk about right away is the search engines. And here, it's at least there's not a confusing scenario here. At least here it's pretty plain. Google is by far and away the dominant search engine. with over 90%, or reaching 96% in almost all markets of South America. So at least that makes it a simpler environment. We've got one search engine really that you need to be worried about, be concerned about, and that search engine is Google. So it's a known commodity in a sense. And it has one of its strongest market shares anywhere in the world in South America. Now, it's worth stepping back before we start drilling down about websites in particular in South America. It's worth just stepping back to figure out what we mean by a localized website and how that works. So if we step back into how does Google work or how do search engines work, it's sort of worth thinking that in a way, search engines like Google, all search engines, but Google is localized. So don't think of it as one Google, google.com USA or google.co.uk for the UK. Google has over 190 country-specific search engines. So that means basically that if I'm in Argentina, I'm going to go on Google Argentina. And Google Argentina is going to take my priorities, my thoughts, my wishes in priority in when they're looking at responding to my searches. So if I'm in Argentina and I go to Google Argentina, I'm going to be typing things in Spanish, in Argentinian Spanish, and Google will respond to me with things that are most applicable to me sitting where I am sitting. So Google, like all search engines, is client specific. They're searcher specific. They're customer centric. So that basically means, for example, that if you have a US website that really was a great website, and you say, I want to get some Brazilian prospective clients here. I want to reach out to Brazil. It isn't good enough to just stick some Portuguese pages on your existing US website. Google knows that a few pages of Brazilian Portuguese on your website does not apply and is not relevant to someone sitting in Sao Paulo. Someone sitting in Sao Paulo, Google will say, well, I'm going to get you the ones that fit most for you, that are closest to Sao Paulo, that are most relevant for what you're doing. This means, that's what we talk about when we talk about localized websites. So localizing the website means making it relevant for that person who's searching, relevant for your prospective buyer, your prospective client. If your prospective client is in Sao Paulo, then you have to make sure that that website that he's accessing is fit for him. So it's not about your website, it's about what they want. So here's a list of the 10 criteria that we use when we talk about a localized website. And you'll see that adapting to a local language, fully adapted to local language, is one criteria out of 10. And it's, translation in that sense, and even more than translation, adapting the language is one aspect. It's by no means some of the most important. Where, to have a localized website, in order for Google to recognize your website as being relevant to your prospective buyer in Argentina, in Mexico, in Chile, they have to be hosted locally with a local registered domain name, has to have design adapted to it, has to fit the regulatory requirements, and so on and so on. So all of these aspects, all of these criteria go into making a localized website. Now, before we launch into the South American websites in particular, I'm going to launch my second poll, which is, guess what? Do you have localized websites already? Do you have localized websites for your export markets? Are you thinking about it? Do you have them for some of your websites, but some of your export markets, but not all? Do you have them for all of your export markets? Let me give you, we're still waiting for some people to respond, but basically I can tell you that the majority, in fact, have them for some export markets, but not all. So the majority of you have localized websites for a few export markets. There's also a large percentage of you about a third thinking about it. And then a few of you have them for all of your main export websites. Thank you very much indeed. So we're very happy to see that some of you are already launched into this, already very cognizant and appreciative of localized websites and what that means for your businesses. So let's move on now, just a few of the big picture items, big picture things about South American websites. The first characteristic that I wanted to highlight was that it is mobile first. And what do we mean by that? It's amazing to me sometimes to think that smartphones were only introduced in 2007. It really changed the business environment for a lot of countries, particularly places like South America. Limited broadband infrastructure means that smartphones became a real necessary economic and business tool. Now, this is just what you see, similar to what you see in a lot of developing markets, or what we call mobile first markets. It has the real consequences for how you build and how you manage websites. The first obvious one is that your website has to be built with mobile in mind. So it has to be multi-platform and mobile enabled from the start. And in fact, very often for South American websites, we'll be building a mobile website before we even build the flat screen, the PC one. So we'll build it off the mobile enabled in the beginning. But it has other consequences as well, which are perhaps less obvious in the beginning. One of them is, with the rise of telephones, with the rise of smartphones in South America, has meant an enormous pickup also then in e-commerce. But all the payment, logistics, e-commerce, all has to be highly mobile enabled as well. 4G coverage is actually really good now across South America. It's about up to 60% of the population. And there's quite a few studies showing that it'll reach, even higher percentage, up to 70% of the population penetration by the end of next year. Some large infrastructure programs. So really, e-commerce then has really picked up across. That's because of this penetration. But there's another part about having smartphones and mobile enabled. And with mobile enabled, mobile first, comes sociability. The South American markets are very sociable, and perhaps it's not just perhaps it's partly because they are on mobile, which seems to somehow generate more social media or lend itself to social media. But it's also, I think, perhaps cultural. I wanted to take a screenshot of a study that was put out by the Mexican Institute for Internet in Spanish here, and it was just really interesting to me. They asked did a survey of people on the internet and said, why, what do you go online for? And in the States, you would say, I go online for my emails. That's the number one thing. And then after that, I will go online for news and then social media. And in this is actually Mexico. In Mexico, nearly 80% of people said, why do you go online? I go online for social media. And social media plays a vital part about where people get news, how they access information, all of that. So, it becomes very, very important how you're looking at social media with your websites for South America. And we'll dive down into this in more detail. So, but just to add, very mobile, very sociable. Now, language is obviously very important, and for South America, as I said, 60% Spanish, 34% Brazilian Portuguese. But a lot of our clients also say to us, right, there's Central America, there's all those little tiny countries. I just don't think I can have one website for all those countries. How do I do this? So we go through a little sort of exercise to say, what's best for you? Is it language or country specific? So one of the questions we get is, should our company target a specific country or target the region? If it's a region, then it becomes a language-specific website. And the region can well be 3 or 4 different countries, for example, in Mesoamerica, or even in sort of, Chile, Argentina, for example. So in an ideal world, you would have one website for every single country. I mean, Apple, for example, has over 200 different websites, country websites. They're all localized for each single country. But not everybody has the pockets of Apple. So we have to choose. So Latin America is classically a place where we find our clients, our companies are looking to say, okay, should I be a country-specific website or a language-specific website? So here's a diagram that we go through with them to say whether you need a language or a country one. Now let's take Central America, for example. Central America is made up of lots of little nations. So it might make sense to have one website to cover the whole region. That would be a language-specific website. It could still be localized in all the other ways that I mentioned on that previous slide, hosted locally with images that people identify with, obviously mobile friendly. But if your company is really targeting one specific country, let's say Chile, and there's enough traffic and potential market in that country, then it makes more sense to have a country-specific website just for Chile. Domain names are really important then at that point. Domain names become absolutely critical for how you then decide for your region or language. And I'm sorry that this slide looks a little bit complex, but it's just to show you the kind of different choices you have. And it really depends on your website strategy, whether you're country focused or language focused. And we can help guide you through which are the best types of domain names. The best option in terms of search engine optimization, so from Google's point of view, would be the first one, using a country code top level domain name. So that's country code. So, www.company. For example, AR for Argentina. So that would be the best in terms of Google. Or else using a generic top-level domain name if you start targeting a region, for example, LAT, as in Latin America. So www.yourbrand.lat for a whole region. The generic one does require a bit more budget, a bit more time, a bit more effort to make sure that Google is recognizing you and making you relevant. But it is well possible. The middle categories there, the subdirectories, also are important. Just continuing that example of Argentina, the AR. If you're country focused from the beginning, you can start using a .com/AR. But if you start targeting a region with a .lat, then you consider building a new site localized for Argentina. Then you add \AR to your .lat. And you can then delineate that and have lots of other websites if you want to pursue that route further down. So again, we go through this exercise to decide in terms of strategy which suits best, whether you're language or country specific, and how much effort you want to put into making sure that Google recognizes you as being relevant for each individual country. But the good news is that you can tailor it over time, and you can actually have a .lat that can apply and can be focused for an entire region, for sort of several countries at once. You don't have to have 33 different websites for the entire of South America. Drilling down very quickly to some of the main countries, we're just going to flick over a couple of them. Obviously, the largest in South America, the 9th largest economy in the world, actually, and the 10th largest in terms of e-commerce, Brazil. So large population. You'll note again that there are more mobile phones in Brazil than people. How about that? Also, that 70% of Brazilians are online and using the internet regularly. Almost all of them are very active on social media. And when I say very active, I mean that 90% of Brazilians are online every day. It has one of the longest time uses for YouTube, for WhatsApp, and for social media in general. So it is a highly, highly responsive market, a great market for doing websites in, and a great market for getting responses and engagement from prospective buyers. Quick look at Mexico, second largest economy in South America, with very strong e-commerce growth, really, really very strong. And again, a terrific, terrific numbers of internet users, 65% of the population using the internet on a very regular basis, and almost pretty well all of them, nearly all of them, on active social media users. And again, there's amazing numbers of people accessing social media on a daily basis. One of the strongest markets for WhatsApp, but also for Facebook. And again, a terrific market for going online and getting engagement. Then just a quick look, and we've bunched this all onto one slide just so that you have this big, broad picture of it. Argentina, Chile, and Colombia, the three markets that we find are most demand after Mexico and Brazil. All three very attractive markets, very responsive in terms of websites, and as you can see, very plugged in. I mean, 93% penetration rate of the internet in Argentina. Colombia has the lowest, as it still has a lot of rural areas that's hard to get even mobile phone access to, but still a very strong link. Again, 100% take up of Facebook on social media. A very, very responsive market for that. So there you have just a couple of sort of big picture on the countries. Now I'm going to turn also with Samantha and talk a bit more about social media in South America. Samantha?
Thanks, Susanna. Yes, okay, so as Susanna mentioned, South America is extremely active on social media. And this is really important for businesses like yours because there was a huge shift for businesses when social media started to become a thing. So before, there was the company which knew who their customers were, they knew who their partners were, and they had an idea of who their competitors were, but it was a very organized structure. They talked to their partners and sold to their customers, and they kind of were aware of their competitors. Now with social media, everybody knows everything about everyone if they really wanted to figure it out. Customers are talking to each other based on reviews and based on people talking to each other through Facebook and WhatsApp. They know who your partners are, they know who you're working with, and they're very aware of who your competitors are. Just with a simple Google search, you can figure out who your competitors are just through a keyword search. So social media has really shifted everything for businesses, and it's really important to be aware of this and to take advantage of social media and talk to your customers and interact with your customers. So moving on to the next slide, specifically Facebook within South America is huge. Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram are the big three, along with YouTube, that I'll kind of get into later. But what's interesting about Facebook is, first off, it's available in 101 languages. It has a huge penetration in the region, as demonstrated by what Susanna was talking about earlier. And another really important thing to note is the top messaging app is WhatsApp, which is also owned by Facebook. Facebook, something important is that Facebook in South America is very cheap comparatively to other large markets like Germany and the UK. The cost per click for Brazil is 4 cents, and for Mexico, it's not even a cent per click. So Facebook is very Facebook in South America creates a lot of engagement, but it's very hard to convert. So people will like your post, they'll go to your page, they'll comment, they'll interact with it, but for them to actually go to your website and to convert to a customer is a little bit more difficult, and it takes a bit more effort on the company's part to interact with potential customers for them to convert. And the number of Facebook users in Latin America has increased and will continue to increase throughout the years. So 2019 estimated, you can see that that it was 282.2. So going on to the next slide, which is YouTube. YouTube is a tremendous tool for exporters. If you take anything away from this webinar, is to please use YouTube not only for your US markets, but for also your international markets. 80% of YouTube's views are from outside of the US, and it's really easy to engage with them because all you have to do is translate your video and put some subtitles on it, and YouTube will recognize that you have these subtitles on the videos. So if you have the YouTube video in Spanish and someone in Latin America is searching for it, they'll come upon your video with the subtitles. So it's just a really nice way to engage with potential customers in just a different way, in a more personable way than just through your website or through a post. Another thing that's important to note about YouTube is that it has local versions in over 88 countries, and it's available in 76 different languages, which covers about 95% of the internet population. So all of these people are people that you can reach through your videos. So it's really important to be on YouTube, please. Going on to the next slide. So kind of tying it back to messaging, not just through keyword research on your websites, but also through social media. It's important to be using the words that the people that you're trying to reach, the words that they're using. So in this example, we have Brazil and Portugal, both Portuguese speaking, but the results for the word trem or comboio is very, very different. So in Brazil, 95% of people searching use the word trem versus comboio, where only 5% of the people use that word. And in Portugal, it's pretty much a direct flip, but even more drastic, with 98% using comboio. So if you have a website and you're trying to sell train parts, for example, and you're trying to get into Brazil and you're using the word comboio, it's not going to resonate with the Brazilian population, and it's going to be very, very difficult to come up on the search engines when you're using comboio and they're searching for trem. Another example of this for Spanish-speaking Latin America is Mexico versus Spain. Also, both Spanish-speaking, but this is auto versus coche, which is car in Spanish. So 73% in Mexico use the word auto versus coche, and even more drastically, again, in Spain, the majority of people use coche versus auto. So when talking to your prospects, to your potential customers, just be really aware of the language that you're using and the dialect that you're choosing to communicate with them. So the main takeaways from this section, kind of touching upon what Susanna was talking about, is that South America is mobile first. They use their cell phones over pretty much anything, especially when talking about social media and personal searches. They are very reactive and sociable, very interactive, very engaging through social media. It's relatively cheap compared to other markets. They have good engagement, but challenging conversion, as I mentioned. And there is a developing e-commerce part that we didn't quite get into, but Mercado Libre has a huge presence in Latin America, and which is why Amazon hasn't even tried entering Latin America, but they're very comfortable with online transactions, not only through Mercado Libre, but also through the company's own website. So definitely something to keep in mind. And I think now is time for our third poll. Susanna?
Fantastic, Samantha. Thank you so much. And I have immediately launched your poll. Do you use social media to promote your businesses in your export markets? And are you doing it in your home markets, in your home market, in some key export markets, your home market, and all your export markets? And I must say, you're getting much faster at responding on the polls. Thank you very much. We've got most of you responding already. And I'd say I'm very happy to say that the big majority of you are using social media. That's great. But many of you are using it only in your home market. But many of you are thinking about it. And I think this is interesting. We have an even split, in fact, between only in our home market and thinking about it, with a few companies on the side of yes in our home markets and in our key export markets. And no, so the big majority are only in our home market and thinking about it. Thank you very much. That's actually the end of our polls. Before we get on to looking at some of the case studies and such, I did want to also draw your attention to the handouts. You should be able to click and drag them onto your screen. We have included an infographic about Brazil's online environment, an infographic on Mexico's online environment, and an infographic on global social media for exporters. So you've got 3 little infographics there that you can pull off the screen, and that'll give you more detail about those markets and about the global social media markets as well, but also about Brazil and Mexico in particular. So let's now talk about some of those exporter case studies and next steps. I did also want to say thank you all very much for your questions. Keep them coming in. We've got some very interesting questions. Samantha and I have some interesting questions coming up after these exporter case studies and next steps. Samantha, do you want to go through some of these?
Yes, thank you, Susanna. So first we have Avionics Support Group, and they are actually a Florida company who sells airline parts. And what their problem was that they were already doing some business internationally, but they were really having trouble entering a few markets, specifically China and Mexico at first. Their products are highly, highly technical, and they had some really great salespeople, but they weren't the best at understanding the technical aspects of their products. So through working with us, we gave them a localized online presence for first China and Mexico. And because of those websites, his sales reps in China were able to talk to the technical people of specific airlines, show them the website. They were able to kind of read through it, get a better grasp and understanding of the technical parts. And they actually landed their first China deal, a $500,000 contract with one of the airlines. So we were very, very proud of them and proud of our work. And through their success in China and also Mexico, we created websites for them in Japan, Brazil. We actually just finished the UAE and Russia as well. And we redid their US site because they had a more old-fashioned, not user-friendly website. So we're really proud of our work that we did with Avionics Support Group, and they just realized how important it is to have a localized presence in those markets. Going on to the next case study, Ocean Optics. Ocean Optics is another Florida company. They were already exporting and doing really well around the world, but they were having trouble in Mexico and Brazil. They did not have a localized online presence. It was, they purely had just an English website. And so just to change up their international strategy, they decided to work with us on the Florida Online Global Program and get a website for the Mexican market and the Brazilian market. And this just filled the holes in their business strategy. They started getting some leads, some interaction from these two markets, And just a little bit of a humble brag, they said that it's the smoothest project they've ever done with an outside agency. Then moving on to VaporPin, which is the next case study. VaporPin was in the process of creating a Brazilian localized website with Brazilian e-commerce functionality, and they were working with their website provider that did a great job on their English site, but when localizing it for Brazil, they found that it just wasn't up to par for what they wanted in the market. So they got in touch with us, and we were able to localize their US presence and give them a fully functioning, very professional e-commerce functionality on their website. And we are actually now working on localized marketing campaigns to generate leads through their social media and SEO to drive them to their localized e-commerce website so that they can finally become customers and make their purchases. So I guess back to you, Susanna.
Thanks very much, Samantha. I am recognizing time is going ahead, so I would really just encourage you all, if you want, we have put a lot on our website. If you go to ibt.onl and look at some of the client success stories, you'll see a lot of videos from the clients talking about their experience. So, how did they find the localized website in each country? What were the choices they made? How did they work it through? What markets did they privilege, and so on? And you'll find that many of them have chosen the South American markets. And my recommendation to you is to go through some of those testimonials and see which companies really are similar to yours, which do you identify with, and that'll help you sort of, inspire you hopefully to get some ideas about strategies that you could have for the South American markets for brand awareness, basically to get found and do business in South America. So just sort of wrapping up before we go on to questions. I mean, from our point of view, and this is a message that we sort of beat the drum about a lot, for us, exporters need localized websites. I think even more than they need a domestic website. In your domestic market, you already have a brand recognition. You have an established client base, that you can work off. But for your export markets, you may well be new to a lot of your prospective buyers there. How and where will they check you out? They will check you out online. And if you have a localized website, it just cements that need and that trust that is so essential to the buying process. So, getting a localized website allows you to get found by your prospective buyers and be understood, and that they trust you because you have invested and you know their market and you have invested in their market. Online at least. So there you go. Just to highlight that is especially rewarding in the South American markets, which are just so reactive and relatively cheap to get good engagement with. So for us, now we're just looking at some questions. And Samantha, I'm going to back the very first one to you, if that's okay. And it's an absolute sort of, straight up here, very plain. How should I start? What are the first steps in getting localized websites? So what do I do first? Samantha, I'll leave that one for you.
Yeah, great question. So two things that you should always do first. The first one is to understand where your top target markets are. Are you already exporting somewhere and you just want to gain a larger presence there? Did you figure out a few holes in your international strategy and you want websites for those specific markets? Do you want to find distributors in new markets or new distributors? You just need to figure out what markets are going to give you the best ROI. Once you figure that out, it's really important to understand what your online presence, what you're currently using your online presence for. So are you using it for e-commerce? Are you using it to find distributors? Is it mostly for informational purposes? So it's really important to have a clear idea as to what you use your website for, and make sure that it's the same for those international markets that you're going to. And once you have those two things established, that's when you can start localizing your website. And I mean, we always suggest getting in touch with a professional provider like IBT Online. But first things first, it's always good to purchase the domain names of the countries that you are trying to enter or already doing business in.
Thanks, Samantha. I'm going to take the next question because it's about digital privacy. The question is, are there digital privacy rules or data rules for Latin America? And if so, how do we get compliant? I think that's a very good question and very topical. And I would really emphasize compliancy, data privacy is a absolute tidal wave hitting the internet, and you really, really must be aware of it and make sure that you are digitally compliant. Obviously, any website we build is fully compliant with local data rules and digital privacy rules, whether that's GDPR in Europe or wherever. Most Latin America countries have slightly stricter rules than America, but many of them, Colombia in particular, but many of them are looking at what Europe has done with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and are thinking about implementing a close version of it within the next, say, 12 months. So, get ready for this. It is coming our way. How do you get compliant with it? Well, people like us build you the websites to make sure that they are compliant, and you absolutely have to. We have a lot of assets also on our website to show about compliancy, and I would recommend you going there as well. Right, another question. Samantha, this one could be for you as well. It's an interesting one. I don't know if I had this one before. How big should a good export website be if we're just starting out? So what's the right size for a website? Samantha, your view.
Yeah, great question. So first off, like I said before, figure out the functionality. If it's going to have an e-commerce platform, obviously it's going to be a much larger website than something that's just a simple informational purpose kind of lead generator. That being said, at IBT Online, we have these online global programs that we work with specific states, and our option A is 12 web pages. So that's a home page, an About Us page, 9 product or service pages, and a Contact Us page, which is considered a microsite, but it's just enough information for SEO purposes, at least to start initially generating some sort of interest. And it's enough to get the message across to your target markets that you're committed to the market, you're serious about doing business with them, and here's a ton of information for them to better understand what you're doing. So we found that 12 web pages is a good place to start.
Thanks, Samantha. I think I'll take the next one, which is, when you build websites for South America, how safe are they? And I guess someone's worried about hacking or whatever. I think what's important to know is that one of the main criteria for localizing your website is that you have to be hosted locally. For one thing, you're going to have you cannot get good speed for the internet, uploading and downloading speed, unless you're hosted locally. And there's nothing worse than going on a website and it takes forever to upload something or get on. So you've got to be hosted locally, and it's a main criteria for ranking for Google as well. When we build websites, we use the very large companies, which all have, most of them are actually American. Most of them are U.S. companies, and they'll have server farms everywhere in the world, including places in South America. So it's no less or more safe than, for example, in the United States. These are the same companies, the same infrastructure, whether they're in Brazil or in Nebraska. So For us, there's a certain level of security done with these big multinationals, and we stick to them, I have to say. So there you go about security. And then that gets back as well to the digital compliance. Compliance is all about security and make sure that you have encryption and so on. So again, making sure that you have strongly encrypted websites. Samantha, just one for you as well. For social media, can we use one campaign for several countries? You know, I guess similar to what we talked about having a .lat for a region. Can you have a regional social media campaign? Samantha, if you're comfortable with that one?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I mean, to a degree, you can have a regional social media campaign, unless you're targeting one country specifically or one or two countries specifically. But you can have a regional social media. That is okay.
We have several other questions, but we did say that this would not be more than 45 minutes. We're now at 55 minutes, so I'm a bit worried about this. We will get back to you directly, individually, to answer all your questions, particularly as a lot of the questions coming in are very, very specific. So I think that it's just left for Samantha and I to say a big, big thank you to all of you for attending. I hope that it was instructive, that you learned something. And for those who have still unanswered questions, we will be getting back to you directly by email or phone or whatever. Could I ask you just to hang on for 1 second more to fill out that survey? That would be really kind of you all. Otherwise, just thank you all very much. Have a great day. Happy exporting particularly to South America. Thank you and goodbye.